Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
My name is Brenda. Welcome to Horrifying History, where you will hear about the unexplained and supernatural events that have stained the pages of history. By the late 1970s, Richard Cottingham had perfected his cover. To neighbors, he was a devoted husband and father. To his co-workers, he was quiet but dependable. To his family, he was a brother, cousin, and friend. But behind the carefully manufactured facade, a predator lived. After years of violent fantasies, he decided to make them a reality. So grab a slice of New York pizza, my spooky friends. Today, you will hear the story of a man who was a serial killer who claimed that he committed the perfect murders without anyone suspecting a thing. Some serial killers leave behind a trail of bodies. Others leave behind mysteries. Then there are those rare predators whose crimes are so horrific and savage that even the most seasoned investigators struggle to comprehend. For years, the streets of New York City were stalked by a monster who, behind the scenes, lived an ordinary life. He was a good father and husband. He had a great job and was able to purchase a house for his family. Yet beneath his carefully constructed mask was a sadistic serial killer who was responsible for some of the most gruesome murders in American history. His name is Richard Francis Cottingham, but he became more well known as the Times Square Ripper. Richard was born on November 25, 1946, in the New York City borough of the Bronx. He was the first of 4 children and spent his childhood in Dumont and Rivervale, New Jersey. At first glance, his upbringing appeared to be ordinary. During the post-war years, America experienced growth and optimism. Families were moving towards new neighborhoods, and children rode their bikes, played, and came home when it was dark. The future was bright, but all of this was deceptive. As with many other serial killers, investigators and psychologists researched Richard's childhood. There were no accounts of abuse or beatings, and he didn't come from a toxic household. In fact, Richard was very close to his mother, but his father was strict and emotionally distant. While this style of upbringing was not uncommon in the 1950s, some experts later theorized that Richard may have developed feelings of inadequacy and resentment at an early age. Whether those feelings played a role in his future activities is impossible to know. There is one event that stands out, though. Richard was in a serious car accident. Accounts vary concerning the exact circumstances of the accident, but what we do know is Richard did receive injuries. He said he experienced head trauma. Others claim that he had to be hospitalized. The possible traumatic brain injury could have started his violent behavior. So, to be clear, my spooky friends, not everyone who receives a brain injury becomes violent. In fact, a massive majority do not. But damage to areas in the brain that are responsible for impulse control, emotional regulation, and empathy has been documented in many violent offenders. Historian Peter Vronsky, who wrote a book about this case, interviewed Richard for over 50 hours. He said that he has not been able to uncover anything in Richard's youth that easily directed him towards a life of violence. His father had a great job. He was adored by his 3 younger sisters. His mother loved him. To outsiders, Richard was well-adjusted and grew up in a family that didn't have any dysfunction. That is why Peter believes that it is possible that when Richard was hit by a car at the age of 4, he likely suffered brain damage to his frontal lobe. As Richard grew up, he was very close to his mother, but had difficulty making friends. Everything appeared to be normal, but it wasn't. At the age of 10, he developed a taste for bondage porn. He later said, and I quote, "The whole idea of bondage had aroused and fascinated me since I was young." Richard did well in school and graduated in 1964. When he attended, he was a member of the school's cross-country and track teams. He developed interests typical of young men growing up during the 1950s and 1960s. Yet, beneath the surface, darker influences may have been taking root. Years later, Richard claimed that experiences involving pornography and violent fantasies shaped him into what he would become. Like many other serial killers, he created a world in his mind where power, control, and domination became intertwined with sexuality. After graduation, Richard found a job with the company where his father was the vice president, the Metropolitan Life Insurance Company. He started working in the mailroom and eventually became a mainframe computer operator. In an era where computers filled entire rooms, very few people understood this technology. Richard appeared to others to be very intelligent, reliable, and dependable. He appeared to be a person who you could trust. In October of 1966, Richard moved to a new job as a computer operator for Blue Cross Blue Shield. Now, believe it or not, my spooky friends, Richard worked in an office with Rodney Alcala. You guys all remember Rodney. In an episode we released last month, Rodney was a serial killer who was called the dating game murderer. This was because he went on the TV show The Dating Game while being a serial killer on the side. According to researchers, the two men were not aware of each other, and there's no evidence that they were familiar with each other before their arrests. In October of 1970, Richard married Janet Mariani in Our Lady of Lourdes Church in Queens. The couple were soon joined by 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. To outsiders, they appeared like a normal suburban family. Good job, a house in New Jersey, but everything appeared ordinary when it wasn't. In April of 1978, Janet filed for divorce on the grounds of abandonment and mental cruelty. In 1980, she withdrew her petition when she was told Richard had been arrested for his crimes. She went through with the divorce after his conviction. That was only a taste of the horror that was Richard Cottingham. During the 1970s, New York City was a very different place from today. Crime rates were high, and different neighborhoods struggled with poverty. Times Square was the embodiment of this. It was very different than the tourist attraction it is today. In today's times, it is filled with bright lights and Broadway shows. Back then, it was filled with porn theaters, peep shows, prostitution, drug dealing, and violence. Times Square became a magnet for predators, and one of them was Richard. He found himself drawn there repeatedly, and his visits soon evolved into an obsession. He spent increasing amount of times in the red light districts, seeking out sex workers and watching porn. He immersed himself in an environment where it was very easy to stay anonymous. To the women Richard was with in Times Square, he was becoming dangerous. In his mind, his fantasies were pushing him into making them a reality. Transitioning from fantasy to violence was very easy for him. Investigators later concluded that this process had been unfolding for years before anyone realized it. For me, one of the most chilling aspects of this story is how successfully Richard hid his true nature. He attended family events, interacted with neighbors, and raised his children. Many serial killers isolate themselves away from society, but Richard was the opposite. He integrated himself so well into society, he became invisible. This gave him the freedom to do what he wanted to do, which was hunt and kill. He looked like a regular Joe, which helped him stay hidden to stalk his prey. Before and during Richard's murder spree, he was arrested multiple times. But the police had no idea that he was an active serial killer. Richard was charged with drunk driving, shoplifting, robbery, sodomy, sexual abuse, and unlawful imprisonment. For some of these, he had to pay a small fine. For others, the victims were too scared to testify. As for the murders, many experts believe that his known victims are just a fraction of his actual crimes. No one knows for sure when he started to kill. This was because missing persons databases were primitive, jurisdictions rarely communicated effectively, DNA testing did not exist, and cases were often looked at in silos. As a result, there may have been a lot more victims than were reported. Richard claims he started killing as a teenager and has murdered up to 100 young women. But for decades after his arrest, he claimed he was innocent. It wasn't until 2009 that Richard confessed to killing the 5 women that he was charged with. In the year 2000, the prosecution started to review cold cases and concluded that Richard was likely responsible for even more murders. He was charged with murder in 1980 and claimed he was innocent until 2009. He admitted to even more crimes in hopes of getting a deal of immunity from the prosecution. The first murders that were connected to Richard shocked even the most experienced investigators. The violence was something they never had seen before. His victims endured unimaginable suffering. Some were restrained for an extended period of time. All the victims showed signs of prolonged torture. They were beaten, and several were mutilated. The sheer brutality suggested that the offender was driven by something more than a desire to kill. Investigators knew that they were searching for a person who enjoyed this process, since the violence they were seeing was far beyond what was necessary to cause death. Richard's last crime was the one that made his house of cards tumble. On May 22, 1980, Richard picked up 18-year-old sex worker Leslie Ann Odell. The two went to a hotel in New Jersey, and after settling in, Richard asked if she wanted a massage. She agreed, and when she rolled onto her stomach, Richard held a knife to her throat. He handcuffed her and started to torture her. At trial, Leslie said that Richard told her, and I quote, "You have to take it. The other girls did, and you have to take it too. You're a whore, and you have to be punished." Leslie reached under the bed to grab a gun that Richard had threatened her with and tried to shoot him. What she did not know until that moment was the gun was a fake. When it did not fire, Richard attacked her with his knife. Her screams of pain and terror were heard by the hotel staff, and they called the police. The police barged into the room and arrested Richard. Inside, they found a leather gag, 2 slave collars, a switchblade, replica guns, and a bunch of prescription medication. He was charged with kidnapping, attempted murder, aggravated assault with a weapon, aggravated sexual assault while armed, possession of a weapon, and possession of a controlled substance. After Richard's arrest, the police searched his home. Inside, they found a locked room in the basement. It was there, as well as in the trunk of his car, that police found personal effects of some of his victims. This is when the police realized that they didn't just have a man with some odd kinks who assaulted and tortured one girl. They actually captured a serial killer. They were dealing with a predator unlike anything they'd ever seen before. The police were determined to give names to all of Richard's victims, and one of the first things they realized was that the more Richard killed, the more his confidence grew, as well as his violence. Richard would frequently prowl Times Square looking for victims. He would often target women who were alone, or he could bring them somewhere to be alone. The woman he would choose was the one he thought was the most vulnerable. His attacks grew increasingly sadistic, and he often inflicted prolonged torture on his victims before their death. He didn't kill quickly. He enjoyed dragging it out so his victims would suffer. It was this level of sadism that distinguished Richard from the other serial killers of the time. Richard's trial started in 1981. 3 women who survived their time with Richard testified along with Leslie Odell. Karen Schilt was able to identify Richard in a lineup, and she testified that she met him on the way home from a bar. She invited Richard in, where he forced the pregnant woman to ingest a large amount of sleeping pills. He then put her in his vehicle and brought her to New Jersey, where he sexually assaulted her. She was found the next morning in a sewer outlet by a police officer. Susan Grier also testified. She was a 19-year-old sex worker when Richard approached her. Now, even though she told Richard that she was booked for the rest of her night, she left him her contact information. The following night, Richard called her and asked to meet up with him at midnight. He picked her up and gave her a drink that was drugged. Susan woke up in a hotel room, and she was covered in her own blood. Richard had tortured her when she was unconscious. He had torn out her earrings, injured her while sexually assaulting her, and beaten her with a garden hose. She survived, but Pamela Wessenfield was not as lucky. Pamela's body was found severely beaten in a New Jersey parking lot. According to her autopsy, she was drugged, bitten multiple times, and brutally beaten, which resulted in multiple injuries all over her body. After his arrest, Richard confessed that he was her killer. Richard also admitted to killing 2 more. In the morning of December 16, 1977, the body of Mary Ann Carr was discovered between a parked van and a chain-link fence belonging to a hotel in New Jersey. The 26-year-old was found wearing scrubs since she worked as an X-ray technician. Her shoes were missing. Richard kidnapped her from the parking lot of her apartment building and brought her to a hotel where her body was discovered. This is where Richard bit, slashed, beat, and sexually assaulted Mary Ann. He then strangled her to death, dumping her body in the hotel's parking lot. On May 5, 1980, the body of Valerie Ann Street was discovered by a hotel worker at the same hotel where Mary Ann was found. She was 19 years old and was a sex worker. Richard had checked into the hotel using an alias and brought Valerie to his room. He then killed her and stuffed her body beneath the bed, where she was found by housekeeping. She was handcuffed and had 2 ligature marks on her throat. She had cuts, bruises, and bite marks all over her body. She also had knife cuts on her breasts, but there was something else that was found. Richard left a fingerprint on the handcuffs restraining Valerie. On December 2, 1979, the New York Fire Department responded to a call reporting that smoke was coming from a guest room of a hotel. Inside, firefighters found the bodies of 2 women, 22-year-old Deidre Gazzari and a second woman that's still not identified. Both of the women's hands have been severed and they were both beheaded. Their autopsy showed that they were tortured, beaten, and sexually assaulted. Richard later admitted to killing them both, and he said he removed the hands and heads to prevent his victims from being identified. Mary Ann Jean Reiner was 25 years old when she met Richard in May of 1980. She was found dead in a hotel in New York City. Richard cut her throat, removed her breasts, and left them on the bed's headboard. He also set her on fire in hopes of destroying evidence. My spooky friends, the confessions continued through Richard's trial and during his prison sentence. On January 24, 1967, 17-year-old Mary Ann Della Sala disappeared after her shift at a ShopRite store in New Jersey. Her remains were found 3 months later in the Passaic River. It was clear to investigators that Mary was not murdered where her remains were found. She was strangled but did not experience sexual assault. On July 17, 1968, a married mother of two named Nancy Vogel was found in her car in New Jersey. She was an acquaintance of Richard's and was last seen leaving her home to play bingo with some friends. She did not go to bingo, though. She went to a shopping mall and was kidnapped from there. Richard strangled her to death in an empty field and placed her back in her car where her body was found. That same day, Jacqueline Leah Harp went missing. The 13-year-old did not come home from her school's band practice. Her body was discovered the following day in a nearby New Jersey stream. Investigators found that the killing was of a sexual nature due to the condition of her clothing, but she was not sexually assaulted. Richard later claimed that he saw the girl walking and tried to convince her to get into his car. She refused. Richard then drove in front of Jacqueline, walked up to her, and dragged her into some bushes where he killed her. He then dumped her body into the stream. On July 13, 1969, Irene Blaze was reported missing by her loved ones. The 18-year-old was found the next day in Saddle River, New Jersey. Richard later confessed that he saw Irene shopping and he convinced her to have a drink with him. After she agreed, the two took a taxi to another location. They spent some time talking before Richard attacked. He beat and sexually assaulted the girl before he strangled her to death using the chain of the crucifix Irene was wearing that day. In July of 1969, Richard murdered 15-year-old Denise Velasca. She left her New Jersey residence to go meet up with friends. She was told to be home by 11 p.m., but she never arrived. Her body was found on the side of a building in Saddlebrook, New Jersey. She had left home to meet up with friends and was walking down the road when Richard drove up and asked her if she needed a ride. When she got into the car, Richard drove them to the parking lot of Richard's former school. He sexually assaulted her before he killed her. On August 9, 1974, two teens went missing. 16-year-old Lorraine Marie Kelly and 17-year-old Mary Ann Pryor. The two had plans for a shopping day at a local mall, but that never happened. The two were dropped off at a bus stop by Lorraine's boyfriend. He was the last person to see them alive. The girls' bodies were discovered 4 days later in the woods close to a business complex. They were both naked and were tied together by their wrists and ankles. Both were beaten, sexually assaulted, and then strangled. They both had cigarette burns all over their bodies. Richard later confessed that he kidnapped the girls, brought them to a hotel room to sexually assault both, and then he drowned them in the hotel's bathtub before dumping their bodies. Richard was sentenced to serve multiple life sentences. He faced multiple indictments, including second-degree murder, kidnapping, attempted murder, aggravated sexual assault, and possession of weapons. It has been cited that he was sentenced to about 937 years in jail, which clearly means he's ineligible for parole. Since he had nothing to lose, the confessions kept coming. In 2002, DNA was able to prove that Richard killed even more women. To this date, this case is one of the oldest ever to be solved and prosecuted by DNA evidence. The first was Diane Martin Kuzik. The 23-year-old dance teacher was found dead in the backseat of her car on February 16, 1968. She had been beaten, sexually assaulted, and strangled to death. Authorities believe that Richard approached her near a mall movie theater and pretended he was a mall security guard. Richard left behind some biological evidence, which was compared to his DNA sample. It was a match. On March 1, 1970, a group of hikers found a woman's body in the woods near South Hayek in New York State. The FBI identified her as 26-year-old Lauren McCraw. Lauren lived in Long Island and was reported missing on February 27th. She had a history with the law, with both drug and prostitution offenses. She was strangled to death, and Richard confessed that he killed her in 2022 after his DNA was matched to the crime. 21-year-old Mary Beth Hines went missing on May 5, 1972. She was found on May 10th in a creek. She vanished when she boarded a bus to go to a nearby dance. She had cuts on her neck and face and had been strangled to death. After DNA tied Richard to this crime, he confessed that he had thrown Mary's body from Rockville Center's Peninsula Boulevard Bridge. Laverne Moy's body was discovered in Rockville Creek on July 20, 1972. After being connected by DNA, Richard confessed that he had beaten and tortured her before throwing her body over the same bridge that he had thrown Mary's body. Next, Richard confessed that he murdered 33-year-old Sheila Hyman on July 20, 1973. Her body was discovered beaten and stabbed to death by her husband, who was out running an errand. She was in their master bedroom, and none of the other rooms other than the bathroom showed any evidence of a struggle. No one in the neighborhood allegedly heard anything to prompt them to call the police. On December 27, 1973, 18-year-old Marie Rosado Neves was found deceased in Wantagh, New York. She was discovered by park maintenance workers wrapped in a gray blanket and covered in plastic bags. She had been strangled to death in an area full of weeds near a bus stop. On October the following year, 15-year-old Lisa Thomas left home to walk to a nearby mall at 3:30 p.m. The mall was only about 700 feet or 214 meters from her family's home. When she did not come home, her father went out to try to find her. He found her body in the woods behind the mall. She was blindfolded with a red piece of cloth that she had in her purse. She sustained lethal blunt force trauma to her head. Richard confessed to killing her on August 26, 2022, and despite this confession, the investigation into her death is ongoing. He has not been yet charged with Lisa's death. In December of 2025, Richard confessed to killing 18-year-old Alice Eberhardt in 1965. Alice was killed in Fair Lawn, New Jersey, but Richard will not face any charges for this crime. Prosecutors noted that they would be wasting the court's time and money since Richard's other crimes put him behind bars for the rest of his life. The case was closed after the confession. With all these confessions over the years, investigators believed that the number of women that Richard had killed was much higher than he confessed to. After all, serial killers always evolve and escalate. By the time of Richard's arrest, he was a very experienced predator. His killing methods suggest years of refinement. The reality is that additional victims remain unidentified and may never be discovered at all. In 2009, Richard claimed that he committed at least 80 murders. Considering his acceleration in violence, he may be telling the truth. Among serial killers, Richard falls into a very disturbing category. This is not because he killed, but because of how he killed. Many killers seek a practical outcome. Some kill for money, some for revenge, or possibly eliminating witnesses. Richard, on the other hand, was driven by something else. He loved his victims' suffering and fear. He craved domination. Despite people thinking that all serial killers are the same, they are not. They vary with their motives, victimology, characteristics, crime scenes, and other factors. Psychologists have classified Richard as a sexually sadistic killer, which is considered to be one of the most heinous. This type of killer is considered to be extremely dangerous to society. Sexual sadism is defined as torture, killing, and mutilating others to achieve sexual gratification. Dr. Malcolm J. McCulloch is a renowned British forensic psychiatrist. He pioneered clinical research on sadistic sexual fantasies and the psychological drivers of serial killers. His research has advanced the understanding of how violent fantasies escalate into lethal behavior. His studies have found that sexually sadistic thoughts of rape, bondage, sodomy, torture, and murder begin around the age of 16. As a child, this type of killer typically was subjected to physical, psychological, or sexual abuse and neglect. But as I said earlier, this didn't happen with Richard. But there are qualities that Richard does share with a sexually sadistic killer. Dr. McCulloch discovered this type of serial killer is predominantly a middle-class Caucasian male. They're mostly under the age of 30, married, and have stable employment. They are usually professionals or are working a white-collar job, and this matches Richard's life since he worked as a mainframe computer operator and programmer. This type of killer thrives on power and control that they have over their victims. They feel like God when they are in a position to decide what will happen to their victim and whether they'll live or die. The sexually sadistic serial killer views their victims not as human, but objects for them to play with. They feel like God when they're in the position to decide what will happen to their victim and whether they'll live or die. The sexually sadistic serial killer views their victims not as human, but as objects to play with. They have no consideration for their actions or the brutality they inflict on their victims. They go to great lengths to plan out every detail of a victim's abduction, torture, and murder. Their victims are usually strangers, and they pre-select them based on individualized criteria. They use superficial charm and persuasion to con their victims into doing what they ask, and have the goal of getting them in a situation where they can control them. Dr. McCullough's research also shows that a sexually sadistic serial killer typically binds, blindfolds, and gags their victims. They do a version of a performance when they are committing sexual assault, torture, and other horrific acts. These acts increase excitement level, leading to increased arousal. This can lead to the victim's death. This type of serial killer typically chooses a specific mode of killing that gives them even further control and excitement, such as stabbing, suffocation, and strangling. After a victim's death, a sexually sadistic serial killer usually takes a trophy from their victims, like jewelry, shoes, and body parts. They do this to attempt to relive the victim's experience, and when they hit the climax of their experience, they then try to hide the victim's body. So, what happened to Richard? As we previously mentioned, he was convicted of 5 murders and 3 assaults. He is serving his time at the Southwood State Prison in Bridgeton, New Jersey, and is housed in the prison hospital palliative care unit. After his original arrest and convictions, he attempted to end his own life several times. The now 79-year-old's health is failing, and he's wheelchair-bound. He will never see the light of day again. Although he admitted to additional murders and told his lawyer that he wanted to come clean to give closure to victims' families, those involved in this case don't believe that he has any remorse at all. According to Steve Janowski, who's a staff writer with the North Jersey media group that covered Richard's hearings, he said, and I quote, "He's not in great shape, and it appears his health is failing. I think that played a role in his admitting to additional murders because he knows he's getting close to the end. His confessions are self-serving and have given him long-denied attention." During this episode, my spooky friends, you may have thought, why did they call this episode New York's Forgotten Killer? Even though Richard violently killed many victims for years, his case has not gained the infamy of other killers of the time. The press back then was concentrating on the sensationalized serial killers of Jeffrey Dahmer and John Wayne Gacy. News outlets' attention to Richard was very short-lived. His crimes, which were mostly against sex workers, got lost in the city's tabloid crime coverage of the time, which had more high-profile murder and mayhem to write about. During these times, crimes against sex workers were largely ignored by the media. Richard Cottingham is still locked away, with his hunting days long gone. But for the loved ones of his victims, the nightmare never ends. Questions remain unanswered, victims may remain unidentified, and some of these secrets may die with Richard. So the next time you find yourself walking through a city at night, Remember that sometimes monsters don't always hide in the darkness. Sometimes they walk among us wearing an ordinary face. Thank you for joining me today. What are your thoughts on the life and crimes of Richard Cottingham? Let us know your thoughts on Facebook at Horrifying History, Instagram and Threads at Horrifying_history, X at Horrifying HIST1, or Blue Sky by searching for Horrifying History. If you haven't already done so, please remember to subscribe to our podcast. When you do, not only do you let more people know about our show, but also you download our next episode on its release day. It's a great way not to miss our next episode. Hitler's youngest enemies, the teen resistance that fought back. To learn even more about Horrifying History, visit our website. When you're there, you will find links to all of our social media and to our YouTube channel, which features not just our podcast episodes, but also additional history-based videos for your enjoyment. We also have a blog that's filled with spooky topics and episode updates to read up on. On top of this site is the home to our fan club, which offers excellent perks, like your own feed to listen to our show ad-free, access to new episodes a week early, and a new bonus episode each week. It is also home to our store that's filled with spooky merchandise that you guys will love. As fan club members, you'll receive a permanent discount in our store as long as you remain a fan club member. You can find all of this and more at horrifying-history-shop.fourthwall.com. Until next time, stay spooky.